Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. I wanted to talk about an interesting thing that's happening within our cultural and political landscape that has to do with World War II. Um, and also, I would like to incorporate that with the concept of the fool, and hopefully connecting those things together. I can kind of show you how symbolism is real, and the whole concept of meeting of heaven and earth, and how that kind of can, I guess you can say, manifest itself in this world. And so before I get into it, I want to first talk about, about World War II. And so most, if not everything, that our society is built on today is based off of World War II as our origin story. It's kind of the creation story of our current cultural and political landscape. And so, if you are accused of something, the modern day witch hunt, or kind of satanic panic of today is kind of, you can say, the Nazi panic of 2025, right? And so you see a lot more claims of calling people like Hitler, calls for fascism, and different things like that. There's a particular dogma associated with it. We see with certain political figures lately that that you can't even question certain dogmas or anything of this war, and it causes scrutiny on you. And I'm not saying that everything everyone says is truthful, but uh, there's a treatment of this historical story of with great reverence and holiness, where even if you question the dogmas or you enter into the altar without being properly initiated, there's a sense of excommunication that happens to the individual. And so you can see that this is how the aspect of something being sacred works, right? It's that's what it means to keep veiled of what you think is holy or sacred, right? Keeping it hidden from the rest of the world, and also treading lightly in how we tell this story. And so, in the same context, back in the day before the Bible was translated, the only ones that really read it were higher hierarchies of the church, so priests and bishops, and that's what or kind of like why there were homilies told, and that's how the studies revolved around it. The later on it was translated, but there's a sense of sacredness, and making sure it's not misconstrued. You can see also recently with the if you guys keep track of it, there was the conversation between Douglas Murray and Dave Smith, and you can kind of see this context of Douglas Murray almost being you can say almost like a bishop of the Church of World War II, and he says, the book hasn't been translated to your language. You're not an expert. How can you know such things? And so there's this development of the sacredness of this origin story, and you have to tread lightly before you ask questions about it. Now, there's this other aspect that is the concept of the fool. And the fool is something like, you can think of it, the court jester. It's kind of like a canary in the coal mine, where he is the only one that's allowed to make fun of the king or the current state of the country or the land he's in. And if the king is a tyrant, he will have the fool killed, right? And so that's how you know that the king is a tyrant, a precursor to something going. But the other thing the fool does is he can take that as what is sacred and kind of turn it on its head, so to make the world upside down, right? And so anyone that's involved and knows about the symbolic world, Jonathan Pajot always says, watch the fool. And so what the fool kind of is like a precursor, that it lays out what's to come, right? And so they're allowed to make fun of what is sacred and question what is sacred. And it's at the time when everybody kind of wants to kill the fool that you realize that he's touched on something sensitive, and if it's something that's really should be kept sacred, or if the fool had a point. Now, one of these fools, you can say, is Kanye West, or now known as Ye. Now, I have to be careful how I word this, because I don't want to be, banned on YouTube or anything like that. So I'm just kind of like covering this landscape. But recently on X, he has released a song that mentions the name of a particular German counselor and the chant that was said as he was on his rise to power. Now, if you actually take a listen to the words of this song, not much of it, especially in the beginning, has to do with the actual praise or worship of this individual, right? And so, in a sense, it's like a satirical work. And so, what he's trying to point to is that in a sense, he's trying to point at him being a fool, you can say. He's pointing to that he's the victim, right? He's being trampled upon. And the beginning of the song, he says that, his bank accounts were locked, his children were taken away from him. And in a sense, they're trying to take away his voice. And the way they are doing that is by, you can say, putting on a garment of being a worshiper of this particular German counselor, right? So, like, in a sense, the worshiper of Satan, right? So they coat him in this, and so him as a fool is actually weaponizing it and turning it against them, where he's turning it upside down. You can also think of it in the sense of the same way when Christ was on the cross and the Jews mocked him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," right? And Kanye, in a way, or Ye as he's now known, is doing a similar thing where he's using that chant of the Germans back during World War II with Hitler's rise to power, that he is in a way mocking it and trying to take away that power, right? He's trying to take that proclamation away from the tyrant and turning that whole narrative up on its head, right? And so with this, in a way, is the breakdown of that origin story, right? Like the veil is being torn down, and there's only so long that a story like that can, you can say, survive without being changed, without people kind of starting catching on to, you can say, the holes or the plot holes within the story, right? And so similarly, you can think of, obviously, there's the Nazi symbol, the swastika, but that's a very powerful symbol on its own, and it was even used before the rise of the fascist party in Germany during World War II, right? That's just a very powerful symbol, and there's only a matter so long that you can contain that symbol within that narrative without breaking loose and kind of showcasing its true meaning, right? And so, you could almost imagine if there was some kind of tyrannical or fascist movement happening today, and they used the peace symbol, that circle with the kind of Trinity-like imagery with the line going down and kind of breaks into the triangle at the bottom. Imagine if they rallied around that symbol, right? And so there's going to be a timing of that where that symbol of peace is going to lose its meaning. It's going to be associated with that group if they gain enough, you can say, power or attention within the world. But it's only so long before the true meaning of that symbol is going to burst out. Now, the other thing with this whole situation is that our hierarchical structures, or you can say our spiritual hierarchical structures, you can see me saying for the fact that, like, World War II is this world's origin story is problematic, because our origin story is obviously that of Genesis. That's the highest origin story, you can say, within the hierarchy of origin stories. Now, it's okay to have other origin stories, cultures have them, different things like that, but they have to be placed within the right level. And at the moment, you have this narrative of World War II that's kind of the highest form, right? And so, like I mentioned in the beginning, people will cry out and call you a Nazi or a fascist, as if that is the worst thing to be called. But yet, you have people, and this is a little bit anecdotal, but I have my own friends, certain friends that are secular, that will proudly wear a satanic shirt or claim, praise to the devil or something. And that doesn't nearly, in our culture, have the same effect as saying the praise to the German counselor, right? And so the satanic symbols and the devil himself encompasses everything that was evil that happened during that time, plus everything else along history. So by proclaiming the praise to the devil, you can say, you are not only praising the devil, but in a way, everything that incorporates that throughout history, right? And so Hitler is a lower level on that hierarchy to the devil. And the fact that we have elevated him to that level beyond the devil is kind of something twisted that's in our culture, right? Because though he did evil things, at the same time, he was a man, and he showcases the capability in some sense that we all have in our hearts to do this. And so, it is kind of shameful, like I mentioned, to that we react so adversely, or I should phrase it in a sense of that saying praises to Hitler is more evil than declaring praises to the devil, right? And so there's something twisted by that. And so what Kanye is doing, what I suspect in that song, and the meaning of this whole event is that as a fool, he's trampling upon the sacredness of the World War II story, symbolizing kind of its breakdown. And you can see this with other figures too. I don't necessarily know much about them, but I know they've been talked about in the media. There's the historian or just historical speaker like Daryl Cooper, and obviously now, like I mentioned, Kanye and Douglas Murray, and this conversation's coming all to the bit. And you see some people are kind of questioning this narrative, while others are trying to uphold the sacredness, the sacred text, you can say, of what was holding this world together, right? And with Kanye coming up and kind of like trampling on it, there's a little bit of a breakdown on this. And so we're going to see a shift a little bit of what's going to be happening with this story. And so hopefully all of this kind of makes sense in terms of the meaning of what Kanye is doing, as well as, how important stories are, the origins of it, and that things that are sacred or holy are real, right? And so some things actually do not need to be trampled upon, right? Including biblical scriptures and stuff. They hold up to scrutiny, but they definitely should be held to a higher reverence, and almost the same reverence we keep World War II narratives currently. And so, hopefully this makes sense. I myself am, Polish. My parents came from Poland. I have a lot of my grandparents and other family members that were highly affected by the things of World War II. I also, helped with a film called Triumph of the Heart that's coming out about St. Maximilian Kolbe in Auschwitz. I've been to Auschwitz. And so I do have an understanding of the evils and things that have happened during that time. But at the same sense, the narrative that has been given out to the people of the West is not as simple, and it's not as, you can say, sacred as we would like to think it is. And it's interesting to see what will happen as the last people of that age fade away, and how the meaning of that story will shift, or in general, how we tell that story will shift. And so, yeah, thank you for tuning in. This one could be kind of heated. I tried to play it as neutrally as possible to kind of showcase the meaning and how, symbolism of a fool and this, this concept of turning things on its head is kind of coming into fruition with this whole motion with Kanye and his song. And yeah, I would love to hear also what you guys have to say in the comments. Please also like and subscribe to my page. I love doing these. I do these completely for free, use my own equipment and stuff, and I enjoy doing it. If I see, that people enjoy following me along and listening to this as well, and being able to share ideas kind of helps me, motivates me to continue doing these as well. So click the like and subscribe button, and I hope to see you in the next video.